Welcome to the Million Vegan Grandmothers podcast. And I have Lee Ettinger, and he is the herbivore doctor. And, he's a very humble herbivore doctor. I was just asking before this interview, how did you get so relaxed and calm? And there's such a beautiful presence to your energy. So I'm so happy to have you here. And I'm so intrigued with children's health. I had an amazing pediatrician when my son was young, but I never could find another one since that wasn't trying to push antibiotics and not really focusing on food. And I remember one time a pediatrician saying to me that there was a mother that came in and was only going to feed her kids vegan, and she felt that was very abusive. So here we are, let's say 30 some years later, how far we've come. Plant-based doctors are going to rule the world. And you are teaching pediatricians how to teach parents. So thank you for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Tommy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about how you got started in the plant-based movement and the actions that you're taking towards teaching parents and children, and maybe the programs you're setting up and the pediatricians that you're bringing this awareness to.
Sure, happy to share. So I've been a pediatric doctor since going back to 2004. I was working in a major medical center as a pediatric kidney doctor. I didn't actually learn about the plant-based diet until 2014. I enjoy cycling, and I was watching cycling videos on YouTube, and a video from a vegan cyclist popped up, and I enjoyed it, and I looked into the more content, and that raised my awareness. I was initially thinking well, how's he doing this sport with? Where does he get his protein? Those kind of things. But I was intrigued. I was curious. I started to watch the documentaries that were out at the time, What the Health and Forks Over Knives. Forks Over Knives was the first one. Reading the books by Dr. McDougall and Dr. Campbell, and I started to make changes in my own diet. And I saw some really rapid benefits. I lost some extra weight I had, and my cycling got better because of that. And my blood pressure, which had always been a little high, came down. No, my blood pressure, which was borderline, came down. My cholesterol, which had always been a little high, came down. I had so much energy. So I started to share this information with the patients that I was working with, because in pediatrics, if you have a child with high blood pressure, that can often be a sign of kidney disease. So local pediatricians around the hospital where I worked would send me these patients, kids with high blood pressure, saying, oh, check out for a kidney problem. I'd find no kidney problem, no carb problem, no hormone problem, but I'd be sitting there with a child with obesity, a child eating the standard American diet. And I started to work with them on eating more plant-based, reducing the salt in their diet, which the plant-based diet is very good at. And sure enough, kids' blood pressures were coming down, parents' blood pressures were coming down. And I was able to even stop some medicines or not have to start some medicines. So that was very professionally rewarding to me. After all I had learned about how to treat high blood pressure, this was like a new tool that I had. And it was very nice to get the feedback from the families. When I write a prescription to lower someone's blood pressure, they'd be like, well, how long do I need to take this for the rest of my life? Or no one really was saying thank you for writing them a prescription. But if I taught them and gave them the tools to change their diet and lifestyle, then they would come back with a better blood pressure that they had achieved themselves. And they'd say, thanks for showing me that. That's wonderful. So again, getting a lot of professional satisfaction from helping families in that way. But you ask about the pediatrician. So I'd be working with families and they'd say, well, my pediatrician says I need to eat meat, or my pediatrician says I need to drink milk. So in 2017, I started to give pediatric grand rounds to hospitals around the state, which is grand rounds are an opportunity for a department like pediatrics or surgery. They get together once a week, and sometimes it's administrative kind of processes that they might be talking about in the department, or sometimes they'd have an expert speaker come in and give a presentation. So that's what I was doing since 2017, giving presentations about the plant-based diet to pediatricians in the community, pediatricians in training, so young student doctors, and really trying to raise awareness that the plant-based diet is an option. It is an option for blood pressure control, for weight management, and really trying to teach families teach pediatricians so that they could support their families. So instead of saying something like, oh, where are you getting your calcium, where are you getting your protein, I have them hopefully now saying, oh, where are you getting your B12, because that's the really important nutrient for those who are going plant-based. So that's been my efforts since I've been learning about the plant-based diet.
Amazing. So, when I was in social work, it was a constant reminder that children aren't formed in a vacuum. They're part of an entire family, community, and global community. So we become, this, what we are, with the propaganda of the world, what is going on around us. And sometimes it's healthy and truth provoking, and other times it's what we've all been told. And as Dr. Will Tuttle says, we were only following orders when we ate flesh and secretions and all of the other stuff that didn't make us very healthy. So it must be very rewarding working with the entire family. And like you said, when you empower them, because that's what it's doing, you're giving them the tools. You're not telling them that this is a disease that's incurable, which is so disempowering. When I was sick with Crohn's, that's what I was told by my GI doctor, is that, sorry, Tammy, if you go off your medication, and I only went on it for a very short time out of desperation, and it made me, more sick. And so I'm like, no, I'm going to find a cure for this. And I went off and started studying, and felt better within about 3 weeks. And I was already eating really well. I was already eating organic. But that disempowered statement that if you go off your medication, you might die. If I wasn't who I was at that time, this feisty person that believed that any problem can be solved if we focus on it long enough and we set a good enough intention, I would have believed that. And so what you're giving people is a different message, is that you have the power to change your health. And that must feel really satisfying to be that doctor.
Very, very satisfying. Yeah. I don't really blame doctors for saying things like that, like what was told to you, because in medical school, we're not really taught about nutrition as a tool. We're taught about medicines and surgeries and things like that. So there's an expression, I don't know if you heard, if you give someone a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So you're looking at a problem like Crohn's or like obesity or like diabetes, and you have, as doctors, that's the tools we were given. That's the tools that we were taught, is the surgeries and the pills. But there's this whole other area that can be very effective. I gave a talk at one of these pediatric grand rounds in March of this year about pediatric hypertension, and I showed a study that of adults, but can be applied to kids. But it showed that adults who reduced their salt intake by 1,000 milligrams, a typical adult is eating 3,000, 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day. If they reduce it by 1,000 milligrams per day, that they can reduce their risk of a cardiovascular event, heart attack or stroke, over the next 10 years by 25%. That's an impressive margin of improvement. If there was a drug that could reduce your risk of a stroke or heart attack by 5%, that drug would be a billion-dollar blockbuster. It would be malpractice if a doctor didn't prescribe such a drug. So here I am saying to some student doctors, like, if you can get your patients to reduce their salt intake, you can get a 25%. It's so much even more powerful than these blockbuster drugs. So is it malpractice for a doctor not to mention salt reduction when counseling a patient about hypertension? Maybe it should be. So yeah, I really want to help other doctors understand the power of nutrition and the power of dietary changes, and sometimes can be even more powerful than the drugs that we were taught or that were given such high regard as being the cures or the only answer.
Right. And thank you for mentioning that, because I have the most loving gastroenterologist, Jill, and when I healed myself, she was curious. She was very curious. And what she said was the majority of my patients don't have the drive to change their diet. And that alone is a level of malpractice in my eyes, though, because they're the ones that the patients see as their leader. So they need to at least get educated enough. And when, especially if they have a patient that cures themselves through diet and lifestyle, to say, you know, I really want to understand this. I really want to educate myself on that. I do understand that that's not what they were trained. And I do understand it's a system issue. And then on the other hand, what you're doing is such a gift. It's such a gift to say, you know, I know that you weren't taught that, but let's look down this road and let's do, you know, the study via offering this to our patients and just see what happens. And it's usually always good news, isn't it, Lee?
Well, there's no side effects. The medicines that we prescribe often come with side effects, but there's no real bad side effects from giving a dietary change, a good trial. So yeah, but like what you said, it can become a very circular argument if a doctor says something like, "Oh, my patients are never going to give this a try. My patients are not going to change their diet, or my patients aren't going to try to quit smoking," or something like that, and you don't even offer that, then yeah, they won't they won't try because they haven't even heard of that as an option. So it becomes a circular argument. So that's a cycle I'm trying to break with the doctors also that I work with, that I try to teach. It's like, hey, at least let them know that this is an option. Even if you're not the expert per se, I'm here. I can help support you, but also there are a lot of resources out there. Let the families know at least that they can give this a try. And there's really very little side effects or harms to making a healthy dietary change, and it might actually work out for the best.
Great. Yes, hearing it from the doctor is amazing. Now, is there very much going on in the school programs? Are doctors going into school programs and sharing with the families?
Heard specifically about that. I've given a few talks at schools over the past few years, middle schools primarily, that are part of their health curriculum that they're learning about. So again, a few talks like that. In New York City, I don't know if you have heard Mayor Eric Adams. You heard about his efforts. He's the mayor of the city, and he cured and reversed his type 2 diabetes. He was actually having vision loss from his type 2 diabetes, and going plant-based restored his health. He lost weight, his diabetes resolved. And so since he's been mayor, he's been making really excellent efforts in spreading the plant-based diet. So now schools in New York City have a vegan Friday. So the meals that are served in the cafeterias are vegan on Fridays. He's also made plant-based meals the default in New York City hospitals. So every meal is plant-based, and you actually have to ask and go out, the patient has to go out of their way to request any animal products on their tray. And I heard him talk about this. This was very actually interesting. When he first proposed this to the hospital systems, they were like, "Oh no, it's going to be too expensive. We can't do that fancy plant-based food." But it turned out that they ended up saving 57 cents per tray with a plant-based meal over the animal-based meals. And you can think about the hundreds of thousands of trays that are served each day in New York City hospitals. That was a really big savings for the city. And he's also making movements to more plant-based eating in the prison system that he is in charge of there in New York City too. So really trying to help everyone with the plant-based diet.
Yes, thank you. And I hear that the default option is really effective. And, they've proven that, in psychology, that the default option is usually what people choose. And maybe we're all just so caught up and busy with our lives, and what's offered to us, we will usually accept unless there's a strong opposition to it. And, I heard somebody speak recently on, making vegan food, a double default, that you can have this vegan option, then you can have this vegan option. And if you absolutely insist on having something else, then you can do that. And that's even more effective. So I think that's what we're moving towards, is that as we're, working towards human and earth and animal liberation, to liberate us from death, disease, and destruction, basically, we need to, eat plants. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if it's the default option, at least it gives someone a pause to think, well, do I really want to make a fuss and get the animal product? and maybe even open their mind to these options. Again, just making people more aware. Maybe they taste it, maybe they like it, that the vegan food is not the weird food or bad tasting food. So all of it is, it's like opportunities to spread the message.
Well, you have such a non-judgmental presence, Lee. So I'm sure that when you come in and start talking to parents about changing their diet, and it's not a blame of doctors, not a blame of parents. It's looking at the collective, the whole, the society norms. The society norm has become normalized violence and death and destruction, and we're just bringing ourselves back to normalized love and care, and finding our best options in the world. And so I'm sure that your families respond really well to you. They feel cared for.
Well, when I was working in the hospital-based system, and I would bring it up, sometimes there was a surprise, like, what are you talking about? So when I was doing this work in the pediatric kidney disease and the pediatric, I joined my hospital's weight management clinic. And then in 2020, COVID hit and my hospital pivoted to telemedicine. So I was doing this work online like this, and started to have the ideas that I could spread my message further and be more available to families doing just telehealth. So that's when I left in 2021 to found the Dr. Herbivore practice to offer throughout the state the plant-based support to families. And so I really wanted to indicate in my name, in my brand as Dr. Herbivore, that the families that were signing up would be getting the plant-based message, because I was surprising families with it in the clinic, because I was an employee in the hospital. I couldn't exactly advertise what I was doing. So in order to get more accepting families or more interested and curious families, that's when I became Dr. Herbivore.
And how's that working? Are you attracting a lot of families? I just see plant-based really increasing rapidly.
Unfortunately, it has been slow. I'm not as busy as I'd like. So what I do offer is in New York and New Jersey, where I'm licensed to practice medicine, I offer two supportive roles. So one is for families who are already vegan or vegetarian and want to get a checkup, an evaluation, a tune-up of their child's nutrition. So that's a 4-week program of working with me with telehealth visits, maybe blood tests or urine tests. I have a plant-based chef who will come online and teach new recipes, go over new cooking skills with the families, and also an e-course, kind of helping the families as they're working with me do some homework, going through the e-course so that they can learn more about how to ensure their child is thriving on the plant-based diet. So that's a 4-week program. And then I have a 12-week program for families that are struggling with pediatric obesity. So it's all of that, the telehealth visits, possibly blood tests, urine tests, even genetic tests for genetic causes of obesity. An e-course for transitioning the family to more plant-based, and specifically picking a plant-based menu that can help with childhood obesity. The chef, I have a youth fitness expert also who will go online and work with the family on from their home. Again, all this is online for convenience. So she'll work with family on stretching or conditioning or strength or even meditation. And then the e-courses that I think I mentioned. But all that's available in New York and New Jersey. And then for families that are more distant, but want to kind of learn from me, I offer just the e-courses as standalone products because I'm not licensed in those states, but certainly can offer some educational content for families.
Great, thank you. How can the Million Vegan Grandmothers help you?
Oh, it's already, I'm happy to help grandmothers too, who are part of one of the e-courses I have is making the switch a plant-based guide for all ages. So if a grandmother is being a role model in her family on the plant-based eating and is getting questions from the next generations, this e-course can show a family how to go plant-based. And there are strategies for making the transition, educational content about how to plan that, and then also how to work with the different children, age groups, whether they're elementary kids or adolescents, and strategies to help the younger generations become more plant-based too. So all that's available in that e-course, which is available on my website, the Dr. Herbivore website.
Well, I know raising my children and raising, I better be careful about saying raising because my daughter and her husband are doing the majority of it. But, I have a large influence in my grandchildren's life who aren't being raised vegan, but it's the hottest conversation in our lives. It seems to come up every single time I'm with them. Is this vegan? Can vegans be strong? All of these 4 to 6-year-old, 9-year-old questions.
Yes.
And the one thing that I do know is that they never liked eating flesh food. It wasn't really their thing unless it was disguised or ground or something like that. They gravitated towards fresh fruit and vegetables. I wasn't the kind of mom that had cookies and milk out when they got home. I always felt if I had a great big huge plate of vegetables with some homemade dip put out when they got home from school, because they're always hungry when they get home from school. It's their little tap in before they jump on their bike or head outside to play. It's gone. The plate of veggies was gone. So now my daughters are in their 30s and they eat a lot of raw vegetables, they love their vegetables. And so it's starting them out, young. And my grandkids have been, my grandson was reminiscing the other day, he's 6 and he says, "Oh, but do you remember when I wasn't even walking yet and you would sit me on the counter and we would make fresh green juice?" And I just thought, wow, it's really powerful when we start them young. And he's actually remembering when he was little. Some kids, I'm always amazed at how some children can remember, so long ago. Some kids forget their earlier times, but my grandson seems to remember things for quite a long time, even without watching a video. And I think it's super important to respect what children will eat within the realm if their taste buds aren't completely, desensitized to natural sugar in an apple or a banana. If they're fed processed chemical, hit that addictive brain salt, oil, sugar bliss point in the brain, it just completely ruins a child in that area. So one of the things I encourage when parents come to me, I have a master's in plant-based nutrition, is to just give them a couple smoothies to start with. I said, do your kids love smoothies? And you want to get that nutrition in, and smoothies is a really easy transition. And they're like, yeah, but they just can't have smoothies all the time. I said, yeah, they can for now. I mean, some kind of fruit and smoothies, you can get your spinach in there and some lettuce and a few hemp hearts for their omega-3 and some frozen fruit. And that's really a helpful hint that I give parents, just at least add a couple of those smoothies in a day to really get a big punch in their nutrition, and the kids love it. So would you have that you can give our listeners?
Well, yeah, I like that technique of it's called crowding out, is making these healthy foods like the smoothies, like the vegetable bowls with dishes, like the fruit, making them easily available and crowding out the junk food or unhealthy food or the animal-based foods. So yeah, if your child's full, then they're not going to be asking or going for that other stuff. So yeah, leading by example and certainly showing how healthy and vibrant and energized you are as a grandparent, and then leading by example to show the children and offering those foods, crowding out. I particularly like bananas because they are bright and yellow, and they can be out of the fridge, out of the pantry, on the counter, so that when the child comes in to the kitchen hungry, asking for a snack, they see the banana, the parent or grandparent sees the banana, offer the banana. It's like quick and easy. And you can have a banana conveyor belt. So you have like green bananas and yellow bananas, and then the brown spotty bananas. And as you're eating up the brown spotty bananas, the yellow bananas become brown spotty and the green become yellow. And then you're putting more green bananas on. So having a banana conveyor belt. So I think bananas are a great snack and can fill a kid up, crowd out any other junk food that they might be rummaging through the pantry for, or through the refrigerator for.
Great. And you'll see when our podcast is live, you'll see on the Million Vegan Grandmothers YouTube in the beginning of the video, you'll see my granddaughter eating some pea sprouts or microgreens that I sprouted, and
Oh,
she's
yeah.
cruising on them like arr, 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 this tray of sprouts. And I think it's really amazing to introduce children to a lot of variety of food as they grow. And I was saying to my granddaughter when she was here the other day, her brother really likes tomatoes, but she doesn't. And I just said, she's 4 and he's 6. And I said, Hads, our taste buds keep changing as we get a little older, and we need to try things 3 to 5 times to decide. We don't know with one taste, because if we don't ever have that taste, we won't know how to assimilate it, right? And she's giving this some thought. She wasn't quite ready to try her tomato yet, but she's giving it thought that maybe I do have to try different things. And so one of the things I hear most frequently from parents is, my child is a picky eater. And so maybe you could just speak on that for a moment, because what I've discovered with picky eaters usually means that they've been eating a lot of food that's been overstimulating for them, and they don't hardly remember anymore what real non-adulterated food tastes like.
Yeah, I like your example of the microgreens also. That's another tip that I give families that I'm working with, and as part of my e-course, is teaching the kids or exposing the kids to how food actually grows with microgreen kits, or maybe even taking them apple picking or blueberry picking or strawberry picking, or seeing the food as it's grown can be a very powerful experience for a young person, above and beyond just taking them shopping in the grocery store. But your question about picky eaters is really, like you said, can be more of an evolutionary problem than a behavior problem, is the way I look at it, in that human beings have been around the planet for 1,000 years, and we were evolved or designed to seek out calories. And our reward centers of our brain really reward ourselves with good feelings when we find that high calorie food, because it means we're 100,000 years ago, it meant we were going to survive another day, another week. So when the child is saying, I don't like this, or I don't want this, I want that, it's just that evolutionary drive of seeking out the high calorie food. And in fact, they might be misbehaving or giving their parent a hard time because it's confusing to them why a parent or guardian, grandparent, is giving them the lower calorie food. It's almost as if they feel like their survival is being threatened. Like, you're supposed to be nourishing me. I need the higher calorie food. Why are you withholding the higher calorie food? And this is happening on an evolutionary scale, like focused in to this conflict over the dining room table, over the breakfast table, or things like that. So rather than try to fight that, I encourage the families to fill the child up on the lower calorie food, so that the brain can be satisfied and resolve this conflict of wanting to survive. It's like, oh, my belly's full, I can survive. So getting over that hump and not limiting the portion size, or not restricting so much that the child feels both hungry and like inadequate calories. So working with families, really want to try to get them to feed more, feed the bananas, feed the vegetables in enough amounts that the child's evolutionary drive can be satisfied, that they're going to survive. So that's how I think about it.
Right. And evolutionary drive is also, in the color, the rainbow color, which is why, the chemical candy companies make things look really bright and colorful. And it's,
right.
I remind my grandkids of that too, that we gravitate towards color, not artificial color in candies, but actually the redness of an apple, or the bright yellow of a banana, or
Yeah. And our brain thinks it's making the right decision, but we're in a situation of evolutionary mismatch. 100,000 years ago, it would have been proper to fill up on the high calorie foods to help prepare for an upcoming famine. But now in 2023, that famine's not coming. We are still driven to fill up on high calorie foods, driven to store fat. The obesity epidemic is our body and our minds thinking it's doing the right thing to prepare ourselves, but it's become problematic because that disappearance of calories is no longer happening. We have calories everywhere. So we're in a situation of evolutionary mismatch, and it's no one's fault. It's why we have the obesity epidemic, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease. It's because our brain continuously thinks we're doing the right thing by filling up on these foods that become problematic.
And often undernourished. So overfed and undernourished is what you must often see.
Yeah. Whether it's anemia or this or that problem, and that is thought to even stimulate our hunger more, in that we're eating these highly processed foods that are high in salt, sugar, and fat, which our brain thinks we need to survive, but we're actually missing out on some important nutrients. Yeah, that's a big problem too.
And the one thing I see with certain children that aren't encouraged to drink water just as their main liquid. My daughters, my
Drink
daughters, uh,
water.
my daughters are both raised with water. We had juice, a little bit of organic apple juice for a special occasion. Sometimes we'd make a warm apple cider with some organic juice, but that was a rare occasion. And if they did have it, it was watered down quite significantly. And I really honor my daughter for that. The kids always have a water bottle with them, and they ask, they know that they need water throughout the day, and they're always asking, where's my water bottle, Omar? Could you? And so that's the other piece that I think is so important. I know I see the majority of the adults I see that I work with, they're dehydrated. Dr. Gabriel Cousens says the brain only needs to be 2% dehydrated to start to shut down. And we need that hydration. So you must, because so much of the food and the high salt food and the chemical food that a lot of kids are eating is so dehydrating, and the mechanism of their thirst mechanism shuts down. So even that hydration, that beginning of nutrition to keep the body so hydrated that, it knows what to do with itself.
Yes, as a pediatric kidney doctor, I approve this message, drink more water, yes. But again, 100,000 years ago, a person finding a refrigerator that had a bottle of water or a bottle of soda, evolutionarily, it would have made the better sense to drink the soda. But now we still have that same drive for the calories and the hydration, and it's become a problem. But yes, definitely want to stay hydrated. Being dehydrated doesn't feel very well. I did a bike ride last week, and just curious, weighed myself after a very hot bike ride, and I had lost several pounds of water, and it feels pretty awful. It feels pretty gross when you run out of water on a bike ride, and it just feel achy and a little bit kind of flu-like almost, above and beyond feeling exhausted from a bike ride. It doesn't feel well to feel dehydrated like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Lee, for this. There's lots of tips for, our listeners, and I would ask everyone to reach out that needs a great pediatrician, whether it's in, the New York, New Jersey area, or, a distance program, because our children they deserve us to be educated. They deserve us to teach them ways to be well and thrive. I mean, it's our birthright to thrive, and it's absolutely appalling that so many of our children are sick. And by the time they're 18, I think the percentage is 50 to 60% of children are on medication. It's very, very high, and that's very disturbing. So we want to turn that around with plant-based nutrition. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any final words?
No, thanks so much for having me. This has been delightful.
Thank you very much.